Hello, my name is Matthew Betson, and this presentation is all about helping students become successful, independent learners on their own and teaching them the strategies and the self-advocacy, the virtues that they need to become those successful, independent learners. So without further ado, let's get it started. All right, so self-awareness, self-advocacy, and self-determination are the three main virtues that will help a student independently learn. If they have a strong self-awareness, self-advocacy, and self-determination, they will be strong, independent learners. And those three virtues undergird each other. If there's a deficit in one, that means there's a deficit overall as their ability to function autonomously. In fourth and fifth grade, a big part of my job is helping them understand that as learners. I want them at the end of the year for sure, but throughout the year to be able to say things like, I'm good at blank, but I need support with blank, and I can do it. That well encapsulate that phrase, that example sentence stem really encapsulates the idea behind those three virtues. So to do this, to accomplish this, I'll normalize things like asking for help by doing quick class talks. I'll teach them how to say things like, I can't see this. Could you write it larger? We'll practice little self-advocacy scripts such as, I learn best when blank, or could I please have blank so I can blank? And then, of course, I'll weave in self-determination by having students set small goals for themselves. They love to track their progress in math and in reading, their scores on tests and in progress monitoring. Having them record that themselves and see where they're trending, whether they're trending up or down, or how they're comparing to other students can be a great source of motivation for some students. So, and then, of course, we need to check in on them and talk about what helped or got in the way, if they have a success or if they have a failure, relatively speaking. And this is crucial for students of all types, but especially those with special needs. But all students will greatly benefit from this kind of installation of these virtues. So we're about to go over several independent learning strategies that students can use for a variety of subjects and a variety of learning applications. But before we do that, I need to stress that it's so important that students feel that this is not extra work. We don't want them to think this is just extra work that's being given to them, because if they feel like that's what we're doing, then they're not going to adopt these strategies. We want to show them that these are valuable strategies by explaining to them what they're getting out of using these strategies: less frustration, saving time, better grades, but then also using the gradual release method to model it for them, first with the I do, working with them with lots of guided practice, and then slowly backing off, and all the while giving them feedback in the moment and through grades to show them, like, are they using the strategy well or not. Some kids will get it right away with these whole group lessons. And others will take small group or tier 2 style support before they really understand these strategies and how to use them. But either way, it's important that we really do that, because I know it's a lot of time invested at the beginning to learn these strategies, to use these strategies, to teach these strategies. But it's so worth it in the end, because it saves so much time when students are able to independently function on their own and learn on their own without your help all the time. And for it to really stick with them, we really need to connect these strategies to real assignments that we give them. If we don't do that, it's not going to stick with them. So in upper elementary, my students are hitting lots of long words in science and social studies, and they're also being expected to read longer and longer texts in those subjects, and in all subjects, they're expected to read more. So teaching them word identification and WARF is a great way to help them increase their word identification and their fluency. So how we can teach them to identify words that they're not aware of is by circling prefixes and circling suffixes, underlining the vowel patterns, and then basically blending them together. But instead of blending phonemes like we do in kindergarten, first, second, and third, we're blending the parts of words, the morphemes and the vowel sounds or the vowel patterns together until it sounds like a word. And once it sounds like a word, then hopefully the light bulb goes off. That's the idea, at least, and they understand, they unlock, how to say a word that they never read before, but they might know in their listening vocabulary, they might have in their listening vocabulary. And then using WARF is all about expanding their fluency and increasing the fluency by teaching them to widen their eye span, so they're not just looking at individual words, they're looking at phrases, they're reading phrase by phrase. Avoiding skip backs, so we don't want to teach them, especially in social studies and science, they might read them into themselves into a corner where they're not understanding what they're reading, but telling them just keep reading on, and then through the context of what they read afterwards, hopefully what they read before will make more sense. And then reading silently, of course, need to get away from mouthing the words and using their tongue. That just slows them down. If they read silently, they'll be reading more quickly. And the flex reading rate is reading things more slowly that are challenging, things that they read on the first blush. They need to read slowly and then go back and reread them again, but just more quickly on the second run through. To teach them these strategies, we would use the gradual release. We model it, we practice it together, and then we let them slowly use it on their own and apply it to real assignments that we give them. So instead of kids just asking, what does this mean? I want them to try to understand what words mean on their own. So the word identification skill will help them read a word, but if they don't know what the word means, then it's pretty much all for naught, right? So to help them read words, we need to help them understand how to attack words by breaking apart them into their morphemes, and then understanding those morphemes, then using the context of the words that they read afterwards or around that word in the sentence or in that paragraph to help them understand what's going on. To do that, we need to hit morphemes hard. I teach a morpheme of the day, a suffix, a prefix, or a root. And we build it, we put visuals on a wall, a morpheme wall that students use visually to help them throughout the year, but also it helps them kind of build up this bank of understanding of morphemes and what they mean. If they know what these morphemes mean, like un and re and ing and full and aqua and spect and tele, then they can use those built up word or those morpheme banks or that morpheme bank to help them read new words and decipher the meaning, even if they've never seen the word before in their life. So it's so important. You teach those common prefixes, roots, suffixes in a systematic and explicit way, and then students will be able to break those words into parts and use the context clues to help them give meaning, and then combine and then guess and check the meaning based on what they read. This is a very useful skill that will help students understand words without ever having to ask anybody what it means. For science and social studies, I like to use Posse as our go-to strategy. Before reading, students will predict using titles, headings, and pictures, and then they'll organize those predictions in a simple concept map that can be done with a graphic organizer. As we read, we'll search for how the information is organized and what the main ideas are, summarize each section in our own words, which is very important, and then finally evaluate by asking, do I really get this? It's sort of like a summation of the summarizing. It's sort of synthesizing all that they summarized and seeing if they actually understand what's being communicated to them. A reciprocal teaching style, it can be really useful for this, and it's basically the gradual release style. Once again, at first I will lead the Posse steps, and then later I'll tell the students to go into groups or into teacher pairs where one will be the teacher and one will be or a few will be the learners, and they'll take turns doing that, and gradually they will all become their own teachers, and we will no longer use those teacher pairs. It's just a gradual release method taught over a longer period of time. What about listening and note-taking? My 4th and 5th graders, if I asked them to take notes over a short mini lesson, whether that be my lecture or a video, I would get very inconsistent results, at least at the beginning of the year. Now they're a lot better at it because they know the cues method. The cues method is clustering 3 to 6 big ideas together instead of copying everything. It's using teacher cues, like I'll wink at them or I'll use an inflection of my voice that tells them that they've picked up over time, means this is important, you need to write this down. These are the 3 reasons, or this is important to remember, and then they'll know, okay, this is important, we need to write this down. Vocabulary, if I take the time to define anything, I've taught my students that means that you need to write it down, you need to know the meaning of it. Or if a video takes the time to define a word, it means it's a key word that you need to know the definition of, so you need to write that down, take notes over it. And then summarizing. After a short chunk of notes, I'll usually give them a little bit of time. I might pause the video or I might pause my lecture, and I'll have them write a short summary, like one sentence that captures the main idea of what that part of the lecture was about. That helps them synthesize the information that they're taking notes on, and it also helps them with review when they look back at their notes later and they've got these these diagrams, these models that they might have drawn, or random definitions of words, and they're looking back like, what was I even learning about? The little summary will help them remember, oh yeah, that my sentence explains what I learned. And then, of course, to teach this, it's just a gradual release. I'll show them myself in a document camera taking notes over a video and explaining, thinking out loud my thought processes as I'm taking those notes, and then I'll practice with them. We'll take notes over something together, and I'll review and check their work, and then eventually they'll be doing it on their own. In writing, I want my students to have a simple, repeatable plan. Writing can be this huge, obtuse wall for some students where even if they're given specific instructions about what to write about, they'll have that pencil and paper in their hand and just be staring at it. So using acronyms like POW and TREE layered on top of each other is great. POW is picking an idea to orient their work, organizing their notes with a graphic organizer, and then writing down initially, and then going back and saying more, fleshing out their ideas. And then layering TREE on that is great for all kinds of writing, but especially opinion and persuasive writing, where you go with a topic sentence, you write down your reasons, you explain the reasons, and then you conclude, you have an ending. With 4th and 5th graders, I would start by writing paragraphs like this, and we would just go over writing paragraphs using POW and using TREE layered on top of it. And then eventually we would expand that into multi-paragraph papers where they'll be able to use POW and TREE over an extent of multiple paragraphs. And once again, you might have guessed, we're using the gradual release. I'm showing them how to do this on the document camera. I'm doing this with them and giving them immediate feedback, and then eventually they're doing it on their own. So my students often freeze on word problems because they just don't know where to start, and STAR gives them a routine to attack that in math. And that is it starts with search by reading the problem carefully, underlining the important info, and circling the question, translating it to show it with a picture, some sort of representation or a manipulative, and then moving on to writing the equation. And then they want to answer by using that model or those manipulatives or the equation. And then they want to check and see if it makes sense, and also check their answer and see if they calculated right. I'll start with manipulatives and drawings in my math teaching, and then I slowly move toward the numbers, the abstract form in each lesson that I teach. And I think that helps them use the STAR method because the STAR method also wants them to use that. It helps them attack math problems more independently when they know what they're doing. The big part is them just understanding the operation that is expected of them, or how to solve the problem, and understanding the question and how to answer it. And once they get that and they use the CRA method, concrete representational to abstract method, they really got it down. A lot of my students, especially those with attention or executive functioning needs, I found struggle more with organization, or as much with organization as they do with actual content. So helping them build routines based on the idea in HOPS, or homework organization and planning system, is great. So we'll have a clear system for folders, binders, and practice cleaning them out regularly. I'll do desk checks with them and folder checks to make sure that they're doing great there. And then students will write homework in an assignment log and check it before leaving. Having that assignment log has been great. And we'll do simple weekly planning, like looking ahead at tests and breaking big tasks into smaller steps. We've been doing calendars in 4th grade, for example, to help them keep track of their big tests or projects that are coming up. And then using checklists and visual reminders in brief conferences where students self-rate how organized they are throughout the week is a great way to help them see their progress towards more organized and away from this disorganized mess which detracts from their learning. So the end goal for all this is not so that they can, do posse when I'm standing right over them and asking them to do posse. I want them to know when and how to use these strategies on their own. So I'll teach self-instruction by having them actually practice talking to themselves through the steps at first, and then internalizing that. And then for self-monitoring, they can use checklists. That's a great way. Did I preview the text? Did I write my summary? Check. Did I follow all parts of STAR for this math problem? Check. And then self-questioning might sound like, do I really understand this paragraph? What is the main idea? Did I include a topic, reasons, and an ending? Keeping strategy posters and cue cards is great, but over time I'll prompt less and less and ask more reflective questions so students slowly shift from depending on me to relying on their own strategies.